Right now on Morning News Now, he said, they said, new revelations into that leaked group chat about a military attack that inadvertently included a journalist. This morning, President Trump and top White House officials pushing back against claims that the information shared detailing plans to strike Yemen was classified.
Claiming of a combat mission, an imminently launched combat mission, is not sensitive government information. I simply don't know what is.
Doesn't look like war plans. Team update is to provide updates in real time.
How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt.
We have team coverage with exactly what was said, who was involved, and why some lawmakers say our national security is at risk. Also this morning, escalation. President Trump hitting the gas on a steep 25% tariff on all imported cars. More on the move and what it means if you are looking to buy. Plus, detainment debate, growing outrage over the arrest of a Tufts graduate student by federal immigration officials captured on camera. Now, Homeland Security doubling down on her detainment as her family demands her release. We'll bring you the latest. And play ball. That's right, baseball fans. Opening day is finally here. We'll get a look at today's epic 14-game lineup that is sure to kick off a thrilling MLB season. I know Joe is excited.
A little bit of something for everyone. My Minnesota Twins are playing. It's always fun to see the Yankees playing here in New York. It's an exciting time. All right, good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to start our show in Washington, where there is mounting pressure for an independent investigation into that leaked Signal group chat discussing plans to attack Yemen. The conversation was between top Trump administration officials, but the Atlantic editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, was accidentally added to the group by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz.
On Wednesday, Goldberg and the Atlantic released the text chain in full. It included messages from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth specifying the types of military aircraft and the timing of strikes, but it did not include information about specific targets. The new release is sparking further calls for accountability from some lawmakers, but the White House and Hegseth are digging in, insisting no classified information was shared.
Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning, out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans, because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information.
In a few moments, we're going to hear from the former Director for European Affairs on the National Security Council, Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman. But before that, let's get to our White House correspondent, Aaron Gilchrist. So, Aaron, what reasons did the Atlantic and Goldberg give for releasing the text conversation in full, and what more does it reveal?
Well, Joe and Savannah, you have two journalists who worked on the original story here who are experienced in covering national security issues. And in their estimation, after they read what was in these messages, they were concerned that there was sensitive, classified information that was being shared in this group. And so the magazine chose first to describe that information rather than publish it in total. But after the original article, you had so many members of the Trump administration saying that this was not classified information, that there was nothing top secret about it. And so they also decided to go after the publication, trying to discredit the Atlantic and its editor-in-chief. And so in an effort to be more transparent about what was there and to share information that the administration said was not classified, we saw this level of detail published yesterday by the Atlantic that talked about the types of aircraft that were being used, the F-18s, the drones, that talked about the timing of some of the attacks that would be launched against the Houthis in Yemen. And the administration, again, has leaned into this narrative that information is not classified, but now it's out there for people who've worked in national security circles for the entirety of their careers to look at this. And we've heard them say time and again, Joe and Savannah, that this is information that should not be available to the general public.
Aaron, we mentioned, of course, the official line here from the White House is that no classified information was contained in these messages. We just heard Pete Hegseth saying that. But it seems like the president might have been a little less certain when he was asked about this directly yesterday, right?
Yeah, you're right. We've heard the administration, again, try to discredit the publication. They've talked about there's no classified information. They've tried to say that the operation was a success, therefore no harm, no foul. The president himself was asked about this, has been asked a few times over the last couple of days, and his responses have been a bit odd, seeming to suggest that either he's not fully aware of all the details that are out there right now and who exactly is involved. I want you to hear a little bit of one of his responses late yesterday about the message chain and this controversy in general.
Well, that's what I've heard. I don't know. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask the various people involved. I really don't know. There was no harm done because the attack was unbelievably successful that night. And it has been unbelievably successful every single night for the last 4 or 5 nights.
And so again, there you hear the president really talking about the operation itself and the level of success that his administration believes they were able to achieve. And again, we've heard members of the administration saying that this story is a distraction. It's an editor trying to get some attention. And so they believe that there's not a story here, Joe and Savannah.
Yeah, still, Aaron, though, even some allies of President Trump, some Republicans, are joining Democrats, calling for a stronger response from the White House. That includes firing people. So we know both the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, they're the ones who are at the center of this firestorm. What kind of pressure are they facing?
There is some pressure. Listen, there are people here in Washington who believe that there needs to be a pound of flesh given up for this mistake. There's been acknowledgement within the administration that this conversation, this information that's now out there was a mistake. And so the question becomes for some, who is to be held responsible? There are Democrats on the Hill who said that both the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, should ultimately be held responsible, the person who created the group and the secretary who put this military information in the group. I want you to hear how President Trump responded when he was asked about Defense Secretary Hegseth and whether he should go.
Hegseth is doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this. Hegseth. How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt. I don't know that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you.
And so that was that peculiar answer that the president gave, saying that Hegseth was essentially not involved. Of course, we know that he's the person who put in this information about the F-18s and the Reapers. The president saying, I guess, and I don't know, several times in some of his responses. And so now, Joe and Savannah, the controversy doesn't go away. There are Republicans who are also suggesting to members of our NBC News team that the administration needs to take a real action on this issue, to not just look into it, as we've been told the administration is doing, but to really investigate and to hold somebody accountable.
All right, Aaron Gilchrist. Aaron, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, former Director for European Affairs on the National Security Council. He's also the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Folly of Realism, How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. Also, he was the whistleblower at the center of President Trump's first impeachment over a phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. So as we mentioned here, the Atlantic has published the transcript of those text messages, and it details this military attack, these plans. Members of the Trump administration saying it wasn't classified information. But now that we have the full picture of what was shared, what's your take and what are your biggest concerns?
Yeah, so seemingly to the general public, it might come across as a he said, she said, but it's because the White House is doing an enormous amount of obfuscation and deflection. This is, on the face of it, telegraphing a attack that's coming. So if you think about just in layman's terms, do you want to lose the element of surprise? If there was a breach of this group, there was, in fact, it was benign in the fact that it was the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic. But if somebody else had access to it, they would know, they would have advanced warning of a coming attack. That puts troops' lives in danger. It's a serious breach. We've not had anything at this level, a principals committee, this kind of breach, and that I could think of, I think, ever. The previous controversy about unclassified emails on personal servers pales in comparison. So I think the White House is trying to do, kind of this semantic argument. Same thing with Secretary Hegseth. He's saying because they didn't classify it, it's not classified. But according to any regulations that you read, whether they're DOD or the Director of National Intelligence, this is about military operations. So it's extremely sensitive. The other part of this that's being missed, I think, is, yes, we should focus on the fact that troops' lives were put in danger, that this is likely a pattern of events. It's the fact that it was really sensitive discussions of a diplomatic nature, or that would have a diplomatic impact, that these folks were really belittling our alliances, harming our ability to work with our friends across the Atlantic. I think the fact is that the Democrats and some Republicans that have served in uniform, that have national security expertise, do take this seriously, and they need to investigate it, because right now it seems like the administration is looking to do what they've done consistently so far, which is deflect, cast aspersions, and really not fundamentally change their ways. And in this case, we clearly need to see the White House accountable, their feet to the fire, so they don't have these kinds of breaches going forward.
So, Colonel, when we talk about accountability, we know there's a growing number of allies to President Trump who are calling on him to actually fire Mike Waltz. Is that enough to ease worries when it comes to national security, or is the issue bigger than that?
I think there is a fundamental issue with this administration believing they are totally unaccountable. They have the House, the Senate, they believe they have the Supreme Court, they claim to have a mandate. So under these conditions, they don't feel like they're accountable to anybody, let alone a minority that has really little power for oversight in Congress. So I think something needs to happen in order to make sure these folks understand that they're not all that different than any other administration that has to abide by the Records Act, that these communications should be over secure channels and recorded for posterity as per the law. I think that hint of Mike Waltz is on the chopping block because the president deflected from Secretary Hegseth, seeming to point the blame on Mike Waltz for creating the group and implying that signal is compromised, which it is to near peers. I think he is quite vulnerable. But it was Secretary Hegseth that, in fact, shared this highly sensitive information that comes across as if it was a copy and paste from another official account. So something needs to happen with regards to an investigation. The IG, potentially for DOD, needs to look into this matter, make sure this isn't a systemic issue, and make sure these types of communications occur in official channels.
What does this incident say about how sensitive information is just generally being shared within the Trump administration?
The fact that this was labeled Houthi PC small group implies that there are other PC small groups for other topics, equally sensitive. It could be Russia-Ukraine negotiations, which, in fact, Russia has advanced capabilities and is doing everything they can to get access to these kinds of communications to peek into what the administration is willing to do. Potentially, those aided the Russian negotiations in Saudi Arabia earlier this week. So I think the fact is that we need to have a better understanding. There needs to be the traditional oversight that you get from Congress needs to be brought into force here. And I really do hope that those national security practitioners, folks that have that background, that understand how our adversaries operate, how this was a severe compromise, are going to look into this and make sure that our troops' lives and U.S. national security is not continued to be placed in danger.
Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Rescuers are searching for 4 missing U.S. soldiers in Lithuania after finding their submerged vehicle. The Pentagon says that armored vehicle was found in a body of water. Officials say the soldiers were riding in that vehicle when they went missing. It happened during a tactical training with Lithuanian forces near the international border with Belarus. Each soldier was from the 1st Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, which is stationed at Fort Stewart in Georgia.
Well, this morning, the global auto industry is reacting to President Trump's sweeping announcement of a 25% tariff on all cars coming into the United States. The White House clarified yesterday that foreign auto parts would also be taxed, even if they're going into cars that are assembled here in the U.S. President Trump said the new tariffs are permanent and that he expects the move to lead to more domestic manufacturing, creating more jobs for Americans.
If you build your car in the United States, there is no tariff. And what that means is a lot of foreign car companies. A lot of companies are going to be in great shape because they've already built their plant, but their plants are underutilized, so they'll be able to expand them inexpensively and quickly. But others will come into our country and build, and they're already looking for sites.
But some trade groups are warning about the potential cost to customers. That includes the president of the trade group Autos Drive America, which represents the U.S. operations of international automakers. She criticized the announcement, saying in part that tariffs will make it more expensive to produce and sell cars in the United States, ultimately leading to higher prices, fewer options for consumers, and fewer manufacturing jobs in the U.S.
We've got NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung here. Brian, good morning. So tell us some of the details here. When do these tariffs start? Are there any exceptions?
Yeah, so these tariffs start soon. They start next Thursday, April 3rd. And as far as exceptions go, the only exceptions would be anything that's already made in the United States. So, yes, if it's a car that's entirely assembled with auto parts from the United States and assembled in the U.S., then it wouldn't be tariffed. But that's, in many cases, very few cars. So it's a 25% tariff on all cars coming into the U.S. on those foreign auto parts. And I know the question is, wait, Brian, I thought we just talked about some sort of tariff exemption for automakers, right, when during the U.S., Mexico and Canada negotiations. Well, even for USMCA compliant, again, that's the trade deal negotiated by Trump over his first term, even for cars that are compliant with that specific deal, apparently the White House is now going to look at a vehicle that comes in, take a look at the percentage of the parts that are not made in the United States, and then do a 25% tariff according to the percentage of the car that is assembled outside of the United States in, say, Canada and Mexico. So even cars that are compliant with a trade deal that he already negotiated could see higher costs coming into the U.S. as well.
So, and that's, first of all, a lot of cars are like that, right, that are built in the U.S. but have parts from outside. And that includes Tesla, right? Right,
yeah. So the White House estimates that this would impact about 8 million cars roughly. They say about 16 million cars come into the United States. They estimate about 50% of them are from foreign, constructed or built in other countries. Now, when it comes to Tesla, there are some vehicles that are made very largely in North America. In fact, when you look at a lot of statistics, it's hard to decouple what's exactly coming from specifically the United States versus what comes from Canada, because they often group the U.S. and Canada together because they're so closely intertwined. But vehicles like, for example, the Model 3 are over 80% made in the U.S. and Canada. But a lot of foreign cars as well are assembled entirely in the United States, meaning that in many cases, actually, the foreign automakers might not be as impacted. Weirdly, in some cases, it might be the likes of like a Ford or a GM that is assembling things in Canada. If they bring it over into the U.S., that would be a 25% tariff. So this is all very complicated. Again, over $400 billion in imports that the United States has in terms of the automotive industry. This is a huge impact for people that are going to be trying to buy a car in the next few months.
And here's another big thing. This is really just like a prelude, right, to what's been teased as this bigger tariff announcement unveiling next week. What do we know about what we might hear there, and how the president is trying to maybe get ahead of retaliation here?
Yeah, so if you look at the calendar, right, April 3rd is next Thursday, but April 2nd is the big day that we've been talking about for the past few weeks. That is the day of American liberation that the president has promised these reciprocal tariffs. So if another country levies, let's say, for example, a 25 or a 30% tariff on a certain agricultural product, well, then the United States would slap that exact number on the same agricultural product that they import from the other country. So this is a type of wide-ranging, sweeping type of tariff that could affect every country, could affect every type of product. So that's really the big one. But again, when you add onto this, because our understanding is that these automotive tariffs would be on top of that, that can make the cost of buying a car even that much higher, depending on what tariffs other countries apply to United States automotive products. So this is a very much moving target. I want to point out, not everyone is opposed to this. The UAW, right? You remember they were actually on the campaign trail supporting Kamala Harris. They did come out and support the Trump tariff, saying that this would protect automotive jobs in the United States. Very powerful union there. But again, a lot of complication to this story, and it just kind of leads up a very confusing tariff headline for what could be next week.
Someone's going to have a busy week next week.
That'll be me.
Thanks, Brian.
Firefighters in the Carolinas are trying to get a handle on several major wildfires. Now high winds are pushing flames dangerously close to homes, forcing people to evacuate, with the fire forecast looking dire. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra is in Pickens, South Carolina, with the latest.
Good morning. Good to be with you. We are at the Incident Command Center. This is just outside of the Table Rock fire in South Carolina. Remember, there are multiple fires across not just South Carolina, but North Carolina. And we understand, according to the latest update we got, that the Table Rock fire, the one that is near us right here, nearly doubled in size overnight. We're talking about roughly 4,600 acres now. So we're about to see an update from Incident Command here. They're about to discuss their latest firefighting efforts, their plans for today. We know that the lack of rain, the lack of humidity, the dryness in the air, and the winds continue to be a factor. And then, of course, the leftover debris from Hurricane Helene. Today marks 6 months since Hurricane Helene ravaged this area and, of course, left behind so much debris, so much that is now causing further fuel for those flames in this region, and of course further trauma for the people who had to flee their homes with whatever they could carry, whatever they could put inside of their trucks and their cars, that of course staying in a temporary shelter wondering what they're going to come home to.
All right, Marissa, thank you.
Well, let's take a look at what's on the horizon for the Carolinas and what else to expect from your Morning News Now weather.
Michelle Grossman joins us now with the forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, so there's no red flag warnings in the Carolinas right now, but there are statements out of the weather offices saying that we do have conditions, like Marissa said, relatively low humidity, also gusty winds, bright sunshine, high pressure that could induce some fire danger once again today. And it's not just the Carolinas, it's into the Northeast as well. So this is going to be an ongoing problem. We are in a drought. This will be many months to come. The fire season used to be May to November. It has grown way past that, and we're going to be talking about this for months and months to come. Let's talk about the rain that is falling in some spots, and it is heavy in some spots, specifically southern Texas. We're looking at training storms going over the same spots, dumping heavy rain, and we're going to see that continuing into tomorrow morning. Notice the Pacific Northwest right off the coast. We have a big cyclone that's bringing in that rain. That's been happening since late yesterday. We're looking at mountain snow as well, some windy conditions there. And then looking at some storms throughout portions of the Midwest. We do have a severe weather risk for parts of Iowa, Kansas, Missouri. So we're going to be watching that as we go throughout today. But notice the East Coast where Marissa says we are dry. We are looking at sunshine, high pressure in control. So that's going to bring us the threat for increased fire danger today once again. Flood alerts all across southern Texas from Victoria to Corpus Christi, to Laredo, because we are looking at heavy rain falling. Where you see those bright colors, that's where we're looking at the heaviest rain falling. And it's sort of just tracking over the same areas. It's pulling that moisture off the Gulf. So this is subtropical-like storms where we're seeing the rain falling, and we could see up to 10, even 15 inches of rain in some localized spots. Generally, we'll see 4 to 8 inches, and we could see the risk for some severe storms as well. So we're going to watch the system move off to the east. It's going to be a slow mover, soaking South Texas. A few thunderstorms are possible, and then by tomorrow, we'll see it sort of shift off to the east. So now we're talking eastern Texas into parts of Louisiana, and then we're not done with it yet, because now we're talking Saturday. We see a severe risk increasing from Texas all the way to Ohio. Could see some storms too in Tennessee and Mississippi. And we're going to be dealing with severe weather on Sunday and Monday as well. Guys, this is what it looks like in southern Texas today. Could see a 60-mile-per-hour winds with any of the storms, some hail as well, specifically Corpus Christi down to Brownsville. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, protecting children. We're going to take you to Utah for a look at a new law aimed at helping some of the youngest influencers keep a portion of their profits.
Up first, though, after the break, controversy over this visit to an El Salvador prison by the head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. We'll be right back. We're back now with new details about Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's high-profile visit to that prison in El Salvador where the Trump administration deported alleged gang members. This comes as the administration is facing new legal setbacks over those deportation flights and doubts about some of those being deported. NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has the details.
The Homeland Security Secretary beyond the border. Kristi Noem under heavy guard in El Salvador. There to see firsthand the prison holding alleged Venezuelan gang members recently deported from the U.S.
Do not come to our country illegally.
The president touting the deportations.
You see the ones we're taking out, Tren de Aragua. the toughest of all gangs.
But a new legal setback. An appeals court backed up the federal judge who had ordered deportation flights halted temporarily to review whether the administration can legally remove migrants without due process under the Alien Enemies Act. The government says 137 Venezuelans accused of being in the gang Tren de Aragua were deported. However, a lawyer for 31-year-old Andre Hernandez says he was wrongly swept up based only on his tattoos.
He is, in fact, a makeup artist and absolutely no association ever with any type of gang.
Our thanks to Kelly O'Donnell for that report. Well, Secretary Noem is also scheduled to visit Colombia and Mexico on this trip.
Thousands of Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza on Wednesday. It was a vocal and public protest against Hamas, the second day of demonstrations there. Protesters chanted anti-Hamas slogans as they marched through the war-torn streets of northern Gaza. This is a rare display of dissent against the militant group that has ruled the enclave for more than a decade.
The Israeli defense minister told Gazans to, quote, learn from the protesters in a statement on Wednesday, adding that demanding the removal of Hamas from Gaza and the release of hostages is the only way to stop the war.
NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv with more on this. So, Matt, tell us just how significant are these protests against Hamas happening in Gaza?
Yeah, hugely significant. And, it's not just because, as you mentioned, they're rare. In many ways, they're kind of unprecedented, especially since October 7th. Hamas has long had a stranglehold on politics in the Gaza Strip for the better part of the last 2 decades. And now to see people flowing through the streets as they were last night and the day before, demanding not just, there were a mix of demands, I should say, not just that they were against Hamas and they want Hamas to step down and surrender power to other Palestinian groups, but also that they want to see a return of aid to the Gaza Strip and a restoration of that ceasefire that for the past 2 months until about 2 weeks ago had really brought some measure of peace to the Gaza Strip. It's clear that what happened over the past week is that when the Israelis decided that they were going to renew the fighting in the Gaza Strip, and we should say that they broke that ceasefire, that we've seen this upswell in frustration. But here in Israel, we heard, as you mentioned, from Israel Katz, the defense minister, but we also heard from Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, speaking to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, saying not only that should, the Palestinians, as we heard from the defense minister, mimic those protesters in the street, he said that this was vindication for their strategy of maximum military pressure against Hamas, something that's been very controversial here, particularly among the family members of those remaining hostages. Joe?
Matt, this comes as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel could seize territory in Gaza if hostages are not freed. He warned that the more Hamas persists in its refusal to release the hostages, the more powerful the pressure that will be exerted. What does this mean for ceasefire negotiations?
Well, when we're talking about the effect on the ceasefire negotiations, that's unclear because the fact is that those are kind of decoupled from the politics that we're seeing here in Israel and even from those protests in the Gaza Strip. That's a totally different thing. The fact is that, we have heard this before. We heard this last week from Israel Katz, the defense minister, saying that Israel was going to be annexing any land that they took in the Gaza Strip unless, again, Hamas gave up those remaining several dozen hostages. Now, when it comes to whether Hamas is going to respond to that or include that or consider that in their negotiations, they probably won't. Because when you talk to Palestinians in Gaza or in the West Bank or a lot of the Arab world, they will say that this has always been Israel's goal, to annex Gaza, to seize land, and to kick out the Palestinians. So whether or not that changes anybody's calculations, I don't know for sure, but I can pretty much say that this is something that a lot of people had already assumed was the case, regardless of these bellicose statements we're hearing from the halls of power here in Israel.
Matt, bigger picture here. It has been nearly 10 days since Israel brought an end to the 2-month-long ceasefire with a renewed offensive in Gaza. Just what's the situation on the ground there?
Desperate, and you can see this just from the videos that we're seeing of those protests. People aren't walking around in something like streets. They're walking around what used to be streets, piles of rubble on either side. The people look gaunt and haggard. They look angry and distraught. And that is a situation that wasn't just predating that ceasefire. This was something that we've been seeing because in the past couple of weeks, since before the Israelis broke that ceasefire, they actually cut off aid distribution into the Gaza Strip, and they cut off electricity to a desalination plant that was crucial to providing fresh water to the residents of the Gaza Strip. So that means that, according to the United Nations, for the past several weeks, something like 9 out of 10 Gazans didn't have access to fresh water. Instead, they were drinking brackish water, a mix of fresh and salty water. So they are unhealthy and they're suffering severely. And adding on top of that, what we've seen in the past 10 days, as you mentioned, the renewed fighting in the Gaza Strip, the situation is truly dire. Joe.
Matt Bradley. Matt, thank you so much.
Well, a key summit is underway in Paris this morning where French President Emmanuel Macron is doubling down on his support for Ukraine.
Yeah, we've got NBC's Matt Bodner with more on that and some other world headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Macron continues to push for a combined European military force to deploy to Ukraine in the event of a peace deal. The idea here is simple in concept, messy in practice. Provide Kyiv with meaningful, hard security guarantees of the type that have been rejected by Washington. Macron said yesterday that this force would deploy to key cities, towns, and facilities and act as a deterrent against future Russian aggression. He emphasized that these troops would follow standard rules of engagement if attacked, meaning that they would fight back. Macron said that this means only Russia could trigger renewed conflict, not the European force. Moving along now to South Korea, the nation's worst ever wildfire continues to devastate southeastern South Korea. This morning, new footage shows us the burned remains of a 1,300-year-old Buddhist temple. Among the ruins is a massive bronze bell, cracked from top to bottom. A number of national heritage artifacts were destroyed in the fire, though some relics were moved to a safe location before it was too late. Locals say the fire swept through the area like a typhoon, burning everything in its path. So far, at least 26 people have died from these fires. And we'll wrap up this hour in Miami. 19-year-old Alexandra Ayala of the Philippines has pulled out a shocking upset of the world's #2 tennis player, who's at the Miami Open. Ayala will now move on to the semifinals, becoming the first player from the Philippines to ever make it this far. The teenage underdog defeated Poland's Iga Świątek 6-2 and then 7-5. Will now face off against America's Jessica Pegula in the semifinal round tomorrow. Hats off to Ayala, and back to you guys.
Yeah, good for her. She'll have to now compete with an American crowd against an American, so it'll be tough, but should be good.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Matt. Coming up, protests and pushback over the detainment of a grad student by federal immigration officials.
When we come back, why Homeland Security says the action was justified. You're watching Morning News now. We're back now with the arrest of another international student who expressed pro-Palestinian views. Video of that arrest is going viral online. It shows a Turkish PhD student at Tufts University being detained by immigration officials. This happened just outside Boston on Tuesday. The Department of Homeland Security accuses her of supporting Hamas. She's now at an ICE facility in Louisiana. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton has the details.
This is the moment Tufts University graduate student Rumeysa Ozturk was arrested and taken into federal custody. Doorbell camera footage obtained by NBC News shows two plainclothes officers approaching the 30-year-old in Somerville outside of Boston. Ozturk at first appears to back away before more agents approach, one eventually taking her phone out of her hand. Officers then take her backpack off, handcuff her, and lead her across the street to a car. An onlooker heard questioning why the officers' faces are covered. Ozturk's lawyer says she was on her way to break Ramadan fast with friends on Tuesday night when she was detained without explanation. She says her client, a Turkish national, was in the U.S. working toward a PhD in child study and human development on a valid F-1 visa, which allows foreign nationals to pursue academics without the intention of immigration. In a statement, the Department of Homeland Security today, writing in part, DHS and ICE investigations found Ozturk engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization that relishes the killing of Americans. Glorifying and supporting terrorists who kill Americans is grounds for visa issuance to be terminated. DHS did not reference specific incidents, but in March of last year, Ozturk co-authored an op-ed for Tufts student newspaper, condemning the university's dismissive nature and condescending tone when responding to calls for the school to acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and divest from companies with direct or indirect ties to Israel. Ozturk's attorney says no charges have been filed to her knowledge and that she's been unable to contact her client. ICE detention records updated today say that Ozturk is now in ICE custody in Basile, Louisiana. Tufts president says the school had no pre-knowledge of this incident and did not share any information with federal authorities prior to the event. Adding, from what we have been told subsequently, the student's visa status has been terminated, and we seek to confirm whether that information is true. The arrest comes on the heels of the high-profile detention of Columbia grad student activist and permanent resident Mahmoud Khalil in New York, spreading fear in the community.
The fact that someone can just be disappeared into the abyss for voicing an idea is absolutely horrifying.
Antonia Hilton, NBC News.
NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Sanadella joins us with more on this detainment. Angela, good morning. So let's start with the statement by the Department of Homeland Security accusing Ozturk of engaging in activities in support of Hamas. What does the law say about visa holders who express views or maybe participate in events that may appear politically controversial?
Right. So here's the thing, Savannah. In theory, constitutionally, we all have the right, visa holders or citizens, to speak in this country without fear of retribution. That said, however, realistically, it is very difficult to challenge a case like this because the Department of Homeland Security has such broad discretion that has been reaffirmed by the courts repeatedly to decide whether or not to revoke a visa for really any reason they want, right? They have almost total broad discretion here, in the same way that they can choose not to let someone into the country if they want to, whether or not it's temporary or permanent. So that said, we all have rights to speak, but in a case of an immigrant like this who's on a temporary visa, the Department of Homeland Security really has the ultimate say.
So, Angela, we've been watching this moment of Ozturk being detained over and over again. It's getting a lot of attention. Her attorney says that she was brought to Louisiana and that for 24 hours was not given access to an attorney. What does the law say here?
Okay, so in a case like this, your rights as an immigrant are far different from anyone who is in a criminal proceeding, even if you were an immigrant who was in a criminal proceeding, which it appears she is not at all here. So we all have the right to access an attorney, even if you can't afford it, if you are being in a criminal proceeding. But in terms of immigration, you are allowed to have an attorney, but the government does not have to appoint one for you. You have to find one on your own. You have to pay for it. So the process is far difficult. The government in no circumstance guarantees you either access to an attorney or provides you one.
So, Angela, what comes next here?
So she would have, though, the right to have a hearing in front of a judge, assuming that she's been in this country for more than 2 years. That ruling just changed in January. But moving forward, again, it is really up to ICE's and the Department of Homeland Security's discretion here. So there is no federal judicial review of an immigration judge's decision. So if at that hearing the immigration judge decides that she should be deported, well, then there really wouldn't be any recourse there, Savannah and Joe.
All right, Angela, thank you so much.
Coming up, a new law meant to keep the youngest influencers safe from their own parents.
When we come back, how one case out of Utah inspired the far-reaching legislation. Stay with us. This is Morning News Now. We're back this morning with a look at a new law in Utah that requires that some children get a cut of the profits that their parents make by posting videos of them online. This comes in response to the conviction of Ruby Franke, the mom behind the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, on abuse charges and growing concerns about protecting children featured in online content. NBC News correspondent David Noriega has more.
In Utah, a far-reaching measure to protect the children of online influencers is now the law of the land.
Some days parenting requires uncomfortable conversations.
After a disturbing child abuse case against momfluencer Ruby Franke shocked the nation. Franke's ex-husband testifying in support of the law.
Putting my children into public social media was wrong, and I regret it every day.
The new law requires parents who make more than $150,000 annually by putting their children online to set aside 15% in a trust for their kids. And it gives people the ability to scrub the internet of content that featured them when they were minors. Franke, a Utah mother of 6, gained notoriety for the family's YouTube channel called 8 Passengers. She was sentenced to 4 to 30 years in prison last year after pleading guilty to 4 counts of child abuse. In her plea agreement, Franke admitted to forcing one child to stay outside in direct sunlight for several days, resulting in serious sunburns with blistered skin. She threatened him with suffocation and drowning. And to prevent him from running away, she handcuffed his wrists and ankles so tightly that they cut through the skin and damaged the tissue. The horrific abuse detected only when that child escaped to a neighbor's house, bloody duct tape around his ankles. Frankie's channel depicted her large family as joyful and tight-knit. But outtakes featured in a new Hulu documentary
If I hear one more word, get out!
tell a different story.
Fake being happy.
Ruby's eldest daughter calling it an industry that exploits kids.
It is a full-time job with employees, business credit cards, managers, and marketing strategies. The difference between family vlogging and a normal business, however, is that all the children are employees.
In the multi-billion-dollar influencer industry, children can be especially lucrative, with some kids' accounts earning tens of millions of dollars from streaming. The new Utah law building on similar decades-old California laws protecting Hollywood's child actors, recently expanded to include influencers. Minnesota and Illinois also adopting protections, with similar bills proposed in 5 more states since 2024. Momentum building nationwide to protect kids whose lives are broadcast online during their most vulnerable years.
Our thanks to David Noriega for that report. Now, by some estimates, the influencer economy as a whole is worth $250 billion. These state-level laws are all that kids in that industry have by way of protections. There's no equivalent now at the federal level.
Turning to financial news, President Trump is weighing a tariff rollback for China, but there is a major catch.
CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and more. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning to you. Yes, so President Trump says that he may reduce tariffs on China in order to close a deal for TikTok's parent company to sell the app's U.S. operations. So a national security law requires ByteDance to shut that business or face an effective U.S. ban. Now, the president signed an executive order in January to delay the deadline to April 5th, but says he may extend that again. Now, President Trump has previously said he wants the U.S. to keep 50% ownership in TikTok through a joint venture. Robinhood wants to be your bank. Yeah, it plans to roll out checking and savings accounts later this year to its paid Gold subscribers. Now, the company would offer them higher interest rates and other benefits. Now, Robinhood isn't an FDIC-insured bank itself, but will work with a partner institution to offer government protection on deposits. And the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been unveiled, and it is going to be big in every way. Now, the studio announcing most of the cast for the next Avengers movie, pulling stars from films ranging from past Avengers and X-Men movies to Black Panther and the upcoming Fantastic Four reboot. So that includes Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Anthony Mackie as Captain America, Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and Rebecca Romijn as Mystique. Now, the Russo brothers are also returning as directors, and Robert Downey Jr. is trading the Iron Man mask in to play Dr. Doom, guys.
I love that he gets to stay with the franchise and play a totally different character.
Yes, I do too. I love that.
All these huge movies coming out.
Yeah.
All right, Silvana, thank you. Coming up, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks because baseball is back.
Yeah, when we come back, we're going to have all the excitement ahead of today's thrilling slate of matchups. We'll be right back. Baseball fans are rejoicing today. It's opening day across the major leagues, but for 2 teams, the Rays and Athletics, it'll look totally different this season. That's because they will play in minor league stadiums. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch got an exclusive look at how the Rays are making themselves at home in their rivals' home.
From the banners to the bathrooms, it's an all-out sprint in Tampa Bay as the Rays get ready for MLB opening day.
It's been a little hectic, to say the least.
That's because instead of prepping their own ballpark, the team is moving into an entirely different venue after Hurricane Milton ripped the roof off of their home, Tropicana Field. This season, the Rays are playing across the bay at Steinbrenner Field, which is the spring training home of the New York Yankees. That means nearly everything branded Bronx Bombers is coming down, and the Rays couldn't start making it look like their own until spring training games wrapped up here Sunday night. We got an exclusive look at the makeover inside the clubhouse. The lockers, the hot tub, even the weight rack, all getting or already have new logos.
For something like this, why does even this matter?
It matters because we want the players to feel comfortable. We want them to feel like this is their house. You put those back there.
The Rays say in total, they're bringing around 3,000 pieces of marketing material that would stretch roughly 1 mile long.
While you were able to keep the team in Tampa Bay, what kind of challenge does playing in this ballpark create for you from a business standpoint?
It's a significant revenue challenge. I mean, we have the same payroll on the field, and we have to find those revenues from somewhere. We only have 10,000 seats in this venue, unlike the 25,000 that we have at Tropicana Field.
Even before this season's new curveball, Rays attendance was an issue. Last year, the team averaged around 16,500 fans per game. Only one team had lower attendance in the AL last year, and they're also in a tricky situation. The Athletics saying goodbye to their longtime home in Oakland, preparing to play at the minor league home of their rivals, the Giants, in Sacramento. Proof they're playing in limbo literally on their uniforms, with a patch on one arm honoring their temporary home and another representing what they hope will become their new home in 2028. Like the Rays, they're sprucing up their temporary digs, including with new tech to keep the grass healthy. A big deal, considering the temperature in Sacramento regularly hits 100, a far cry from Oakland's more moderate climate. The weather, a new challenge back here in Tampa, too. It's the first time the Rays will play home games outside, where rain, heat, and humidity all haunt Florida summers.
Being inside of a dome, we were a little limited on what we could do, like fireworks and flyovers, something that you've become accustomed to at large stadiums. And this season, we get to bring that to our fans.
What comes next isn't clear. As of now, the team is not moving forward with a new ballpark in St. Petersburg. And that's delaying plans for MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, who says he wants to get an MLB expansion to 32 teams in motion before he retires in 2029. On the list, Nashville, Portland, Salt Lake City, even international destinations like Mexico City and Montreal. But he says that can't get done until the Rays sort out their situation.
Our thanks to Jesse Kirsch for that report. The Rays will open their season at Steinbrenner Field tomorrow against the Colorado Rockies. The Athletics will play their first game in Sacramento on Monday. That's against the Cubs. Let's now bring in Keith Law, senior baseball writer for The Athletic. Keith, good to have you with us. Happy opening day. Let's start there with the Rays and the A's playing in new homes this season. What do you think that's going to be like for them?
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great for the players, and it's going to be a pretty different caliber of baseball, especially I think at Steinbrenner Field, where the dimensions are obviously very different than almost any other major league stadium, because the Yankees had designed it to look a lot like Yankee Stadium. So I think we're going to see a lot of differences in the scores and the way the teams have to use their players. And as you mentioned in the feature there too, we're going to see a lot of rainouts in Tampa. So I don't think either situation is particularly great. I'm much more worried about what the impact is going to be on the Rays than the impact of playing in Sacramento is going to be on the Athletics.
Yeah, I mean, the A's, I can't imagine having Sacramento on one arm and then Las Vegas on the other arm. It's a very strange thing. Exactly. If you remove the baseball park part of this, where they're playing, just for those two franchises, how are they looking this season? What does the future look like for them?
So the Athletics are in a rebuild, and it's pretty clear that they've started planning to try to be contenders the moment they hit Las Vegas, assuming they get there. And I agree with the feature. It's possible they never get there, but that would be the right strategy. If I were in baseball ops there, I'd say, okay, we know we're trying to get into this new stadium by a certain date. Let's make sure that when we get there, we have a contending team in place. The Rays, on the other hand, are trying to get back to the postseason. They didn't miss by much last year. They are very frequently contenders. They're probably the best team in baseball in terms of getting the most out of the least. They spend very little on their payroll. They have tremendous scouting, tremendous player development. And I do think they have a better team on the field this year, and they're healthier. They had injuries to 3 of their key starters last year, all having Tommy John surgery. The rotation looks a little bit healthier this year. I think they have more depth, and I do think they'll get back to the playoffs this season.
Let's talk about a team that is not rebuilding this year. That's the World Series champs, the Dodgers. The season officially got underway last week with the Dodgers beating the Cubs in that really cool Tokyo series. Does it seem like the Dodgers are the odds-on favorite to repeat this year?
I mean, I think that's the safe bet. If you said you wanted to just pick one team, of course you pick the Dodgers. They're the best team in baseball on paper, and they went out and got better this offseason. They got Blake Snell. They signed Roki Sasaki from Japan. They added Michael Conforto to the outfield. They are just better across the board. That said, the playoffs are close to random in baseball, and the best team doesn't always win. You could have made the same argument about the Dodgers going into 2023 and 2022, and they didn't get to the World Series in either of those years. So I think there's a very good chance they don't get back to the World Series, and it's nothing against them. It's just that's the nature of the playoffs in baseball, where the right team gets hot or healthy in a 5 or 7 game series, and essentially any team can beat any other team when you're talking about that short a time window.
Keith, we have just 15 seconds here, but I have to ask about the Mets now with Juan Soto, the $765 million man. Could this be their year?
It could be. I love the move. They did a lot of things to get better. If you're looking for a nitpick, it's that the rotation is a little shaky. It's a lot of guys who haven't pitched a full season before as starters, who've had health issues, but they're going to put a lot of runs on the board with Soto on base as often as he is.
But you do need that pitching. All right. Keith, great to have you with us. Happy opening day. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this Thursday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, the urgent calls to action in Washington over that intelligence group chat leak. Top allies to President Trump now demanding he fire his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, after including a magazine editor on a text chain that discussed sensitive military plans. But does the president agree? We've got the latest from the White House. Also this morning, more tariff troubles rocking Wall Street and Main Street. President Trump slapping another 25% levy on all cars made outside of America. He's threatening even more, could be on the way. So if you're looking to buy some new wheels, what do you need to know? We are watching your wallet. Plus, states of emergency. More folks across the Carolinas forced to flee their homes. Devastating wildfires torching thousands of acres of land up and down the East Coast. Strong winds now fanning the flames to catastrophic proportions. The stories of survival and heartache at the mercy of Mother Nature. And batter up. The fields are trimmed, the plates dusted. You can probably smell the faint aroma of hot dogs. Baseball is finally back for opening day 2025. We're breaking down today's slew of Major League matchups and the Cinderella storylines that are sure to keep fans glued to their gloves all season long. Who are you rooting for this year?
The Padres.
The Padres. All right.
Always.
I like their uniforms. They have the coolest uniforms.
No, I know. And they did that whole switch up with the colors and everything.
Yeah.
It's cool.
All right. Let's begin this hour with growing calls for an independent investigation into that leaked Signal group chat involving top Trump administration national security officials.
Yeah, that's after the entire text chain of that conversation was released by the Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg, who was inadvertently added to the chat. Despite calls for accountability, the White House is doubling down, insisting the messages did not include any classified information. In a few moments, we'll hear from NBC News national security analyst Frank Figluzzi. But before that, let's get to our senior White House correspondent, Garrett Haake. Hey, Garrett, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. We've started to hear from some officials involved in that chat, acknowledging that it was a mistake, at least to have a reporter added to it while they discuss sensitive national security matters. Now, the White House is still insisting that none of the content of this chat was classified, and with The Atlantic now releasing the entire transcript, what was once a secret discussion about strike plans is now being debated fully in the open.
This morning, calls are growing louder for an independent investigation into the now infamous Signal group chat featuring top Trump administration officials and a magazine editor who was inadvertently included. On Wednesday, The Atlantic released screenshots of the entire days-long group discussion. President Trump dismissing the entire episode as overblown.
The press upplays it. I think it's all a witch hunt.
The new screenshots show Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth writing hours before American airstrikes on Iran-backed rebels in Yemen were set to begin. At 12:15, F-18s launch, the first strike package. At 1:45, strike drones launch. 2:10, more F-18s launch. And writing that 5 minutes later, quote, is when the first bombs will definitely drop. But the messages did not contain any information about specific targets. Hegseth continuing to insist he did nothing wrong.
There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information.
The White House agreeing no information shared on the app was classified.
There was no classified information transmitted. There were no war plans discussed.
The president, less definitive.
Do you still believe nothing classified was shared?
Well, that's what I've heard. I don't know.
Brad Bowman is a former Army Black Hawk pilot and former military advisor to 3 Republican senators.
Is that credible to you?
The information related to future military operations is the essence of classified information. It is difficult for me to imagine anything more classified than that.
Senate Armed Services Chair, Republican Roger Wicker, now calling for an independent investigation.
I would have wanted it classified.
With top intelligence officials back on Capitol Hill for a second day, outraged Democrats demanding a stronger response from the White House, including firings.
There can be no fixes. There can be no corrections until there is accountability.
On the accountability front, the president seems unlikely to fire any of the major figures involved in this, at least for now. He's repeatedly defended Mike Waltz, who created that group chat. And on Pete Hegseth yesterday, the president said he had done nothing wrong. Here at the White House, there is an internal investigation underway being led by Waltz's department, the National Security Council, and by the counsel's office here at the White House. Savannah, Joe?
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Let's bring in our security analyst, Frank Figluzzi. So, Frank, as we mentioned, the White House insists no classified information was included in those messages. Based on what you've seen, what do you call this information?
Yeah, 25 years in the FBI, I headed counterintelligence and also had to lead all leak investigations. I was also an original classifying authority for the FBI, meaning I had to label information from within the FBI as classified or not. This is classified information. There's no question in my mind that it is. And if an adversary, or for that matter, an ally, got a hold of it, there could have been grave repercussions to U.S. military troops that were involved in this attack. So there must be a normal and neutral investigation of this, and that should include other uses of signal by this group. Because of the high-level nature of these officials on this call, no one agency that they head should be handed this investigation. They should be recusing themselves from doing it. So nothing about this is normal. It's incredulous that they continue to assert that it wasn't classified. And clearly, I'm concerned about a damage assessment. Where were each of these individuals? Do we have intelligence community information that foreign operatives were indeed compromising their phones at the location they were at the time, including in Moscow for one of the participants on the call?
There's been a lot of attention on the particular app used here called Signal. It's encrypted, and it is seen as one of the most secure ways of sending text, but maybe that's just, for regular people like us. Should it be used by government officials to communicate these types of messages? Can you just definitively say what the risk is there?
Yeah, so the important part of your question was the last part, which is, to communicate messages like this. Like this? No. So it is okay to use Signal for innocuous conversations, knowing that you're a targeted official, even where you're going to meet for lunch, even, hey, let's all get on a secure call at 2 p.m. That should be a Signal call. But you have at your disposal, each of these officials has hardened government devices that are highly encrypted and constantly checked for compromise. That's what they should be using for this. Signal is not necessary. We are aware, and there are even memos that have come out in this reporting, where the government says China may have compromised commercial apps like Signal. You should know that. You should know better. Every morning when these officials come to work, they get in a limo. They get handed the morning briefing on a hardened government encrypted device. They know they can do better.
So what kind of message, Frank, does this send to our adversaries who are obviously watching all of this unfold?
Well, we've already heard from a UK official who has said publicly, we can't trust this administration with our UK sensitive information. So it's already having repercussions in terms of sharing with the Five Eyes partners. The other thing I don't hear a lot of people talking about is how do we move forward? Since I was someone who led investigations into this criminally, how do we move forward with the garden variety employee who is involved in an inadvertent leak, when they can look at this and say, well, you didn't prosecute those high-ranking people, and that was worse than my case? it's going to be a problem.
All right. Frank Figluzzi, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
This morning, the global auto industry is reacting to fresh 25% tariffs announced by President Trump. The new tax will apply to all cars and foreign parts imported to the U.S. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans has the details.
This morning, American consumers potentially facing higher car prices as President Trump's trade war keeps ramping up. After the president announced Wednesday the U.S. will impose a 25% tariff on imported cars and car parts.
If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
Trump aiming to boost manufacturing in the U.S.
A lot of companies are going to be in great shape because they've already built their plant. Others will come into our country and build.
Nearly half of all vehicles sold in the U.S. are imported, including popular cars like the Chrysler Pacifica minivan, the VW Jetta, some Chevy Silverados, and the Ford Maverick, according to Auto Week. And many companies, even if they have American factories, use foreign parts.
It's pretty easy to do if parts are made in America, and we'll have very strong policing.
Now, experts say the tariffs could raise the price on new cars by thousands of dollars. And it could come quickly. Dealers only have about 60 days of inventory on their lots. Like many of the Trump administration's tariffs, Mexico, one of the biggest exporters of cars and car parts, will be hit especially hard. Trump is also targeting Canada, another major exporter. The Canadian Prime Minister responding overnight.
This is a direct attack, to be clear, a direct attack.
Thanks to Christine Romans for that report. Well, the tariffs will go into effect next Wednesday night on President Trump's, quote, Liberation Day, where he is expected to roll out more sweeping reciprocal tariffs against major trade partners.
The federal government gets to retain a tighter level of control over so-called ghost guns. Now, these are firearms that people can build at home using parts purchased online. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 to uphold Biden-era restrictions. Under those rules, these gun-making kits can be regulated the same way as firearms.
Before this regulation was put in place back in 2022, ghost guns, they were often untraceable, and people used them to avoid background checks.
For more on this ruling, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good to have you with us. So let's be clear. This was not about Second Amendment issues. No. This was not about gun ownership. This was about regulating the gun market. Explain more about what this decision means.
You're exactly right. And in a way, the challengers were arguing that these are not firearms to begin with. They're basically, it's almost a very fundamental philosophical discussion. When does a gun become a gun? And the question is, did the ATF exceed its authority under the federal law that allows them to regulate firearms? We know they can regulate firearms. They require them to stamp a serial number on them. But can you regulate these kits, these parts? Are they firearms? And it's really a two-part test. And I have to borrow from Justice Gorsuch's example in his opinion because it's so helpful. He likens it to when you want to go buy a table. Let's say you go to IKEA, and he gave this example, and you buy something called a Klorg or something like that. Yes. You look at the picture on it, and oh, that's a table. And you bring it home, and there are two parts to this test. Number one, is it a table? And then, if it's not immediately a table, is it readily converted into a table? Now, have you ever bought anything from IKEA? It usually takes 7 to 8 hours to assemble whatever you bought at IKEA.
A table.
That's so
is it right? It might become something else. So is it readily converted into a table? Well, if we agree the IKEA table is a table, those firearms, some of them can be assembled in 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. So the two-part test to Gorsuch was satisfied. Do you look at it and say, is this a weapon? Because if you go to the hardware store and get all the different parts for a gun, I think we'd agree, well, you might have something that can become a gun in your bag, but it's not a gun yet. Then can it be readily converted? And to Justice Gorsuch, ultimately, these kits are firearms, therefore they can be regulated.
Joe mentioned this, but this wasn't so much a gun rights case here. And in fact, this court has this history of conservative majority of upholding gun rights when it comes to anything that comes before the court. Explain how this was different.
Because this was not a Second Amendment case. And in fact, in the opinion, the entire opinion with dissenting opinions and everything, the word Second Amendment doesn't even appear. This was a strictly statutory interpretation question. And this is an area that Justice Gorsuch has written a lot about. And conservative justices, in fact, really look to the language of the statute. So when the Second Amendment was not involved, this became an issue of statutory interpretation on this issue, just like any other issue of statutory interpretation. And ultimately, the court concluded, by analyzing what a weapon is and what readily converted means to conclude that these kits, not all of them, and this is key, because Gorsuch said this was a facial challenge. In other words, the challengers said this law, this is categorically wrong across the board. That's not, the court ultimately decided that in the future, it's possible that some kits may be outside the purview of the regulation. But this was about a global challenge to the regulation as a whole, and the regulation survives.
Real quick here, if the Trump administration or another future administration wanted to just rescind this rule, can it?
You want real quick? The answer is yes. Yeah. Slightly longer, they could do it a couple different ways. They could either just decline to enforce it, or they could force the ATF to revise it.
All right, Danny Ceballos, thank you so much.
As always. Well, the safety of air travel is in the spotlight this morning as heads of the FAA, NTSB, and Army Aviation prepare to go before a Senate committee for day 2 of testimony. This hearing is looking into that mid-air crash above the Potomac River in January that left 67 people dead. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello covers aviation for us. He has the details. Hi, Tom. Good morning.
Yeah, veteran crash investigators say this is very common in crashes. Many things lined up and went wrong at the same time, leading to the loss of 67 lives, including air traffic control staffing shortages, communication failures, planes and choppers sharing the same airspace, and pilot error. 8 weeks since the mid-air crash between an American Airlines regional jet and an Army helicopter, the NTSB chief told Congress on Wednesday she was stunned that for years the FAA never saw the risk of a chopper plane collision in that airspace, despite more than 15,000 close calls over a 3-year period.
If you look at the helicopter route, that there's only 75 feet of separation between a plane coming in to runway 33 max. That's 75 feet max.
The NTSB has already determined the Army helicopter was flying too high, possibly because the pilots had bad altitude data. The chopper crew may not have heard air traffic control instructions to pass behind the jet and may have turned off their ADSB transmitter, which broadcasts a precise location. The FAA has since halted most helicopter traffic around Reagan Airport. In the control tower, the FAA says 5 controllers were working that night, but one was doing the work of 2, handling both chopper and plane traffic. Nationwide, the FAA is short 3,500 controllers as it tries to hire more controllers faster. But training takes time, and there's a high washout rate at the academy.
It's great to be here.
As Transportation Secretary Duffy stressed last month.
This is not a quick fix, is it? No, it's going to take years. Because, again, you have to get trained up. Then once you're trained out of the academy, it takes time to get certified in your tower.
Up to 3 years before a controller is on his or her own. Back in Washington, Casey Crafton was among the 67 people who died that night, a husband and father of 3.
It's left a gaping void, of course, especially for Rachel and my nephews. He's, not there. It just sends you kind of reeling.
Family members tell us that they want answers and assurances that the government is taking steps to ensure nothing like this happens again. We expect a lot of questions about whether that military chopper had turned off its ADSB transmitter and why, if it was on a regular training flight. The FAA chief will talk about trying to hire 2,000 controllers this year and keep up with the rate of retirement and attrition. Guys, back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you.
Out-of-control wildfires are forcing North Carolina's governor to expand the state of emergency there. While in South Carolina, one fire has nearly doubled in size. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra, who joins us from Pickens, South Carolina, with the latest. Marissa, good morning.
Hey guys, good morning. So you are seeing the center of the firefighting efforts from the planning side. So within the hour, we saw a whole debrief. Of course, firefighters, crews were talking about their strategy, what we're seeing today. And part of what we're seeing today are new evacuations, because as you mentioned, there's actually 2 fires here in South Carolina. We've been keeping a close eye on Persimmon Ridge and Table Rock. They have respectively doubled and tripled in size.
Flames and thick smoke blanketing parts of the Carolinas, as a growing number of residents are forced to flee.
If it's destroyed, it's destroyed. I'll just have to start from scratch and go on.
Millions across the region under red flag warnings. One wildfire burning dangerously close to this neighborhood in South Florida. The Table Rock fire in South Carolina tearing through a popular state park, which the local sheriff says was started by a group of teenage hikers.
It takes just a few seconds for something to go from under control to out of control, and it can endanger a lot of people very, very rapidly.
Strong winds coupled with debris left behind by Hurricane Helene last September have been acting like a tinderbox, causing flames to spread quickly.
From the air, the amount of down debris and timber in the woods is almost indescribable.
A ring of fire glowing around this reservoir has residents worried about what will be left when they come back. Wendy Clark is staying in a local shelter after being forced to evacuate from the only home she's ever known.
Feels like back-to-back natural disasters. Never in my 52 years did I think that I would be running from my home from a fire.
And now, new evacuation orders for North Carolina.
Definitely get some bags packed, pull some of your important papers together, and get everybody ready.
The governor there declaring a state of emergency as 3 wildfires continue to burn a combined 7,000 acres.
I'm hoping that it doesn't jump and we get it over there and burns up our property.
Crews working around the clock with no immediate end in sight to the ongoing threat.
Now, it might be hard to tell right now, but from where we're standing at Incident Command, there have been moments where we've seen the flames creeping over the edge of that ridge over there, of course, at this moment, blanketed with a thick cloud of smoke. And when we talk about new strategies, they said that they're actually going to be taking a more aggressive approach today, doing a controlled burn not far from where we are, in hopes that that will help stave off the fire, but they have to do it soon because those winds are going to be picking up in the next several hours. And Joe, all of this on the 6-month anniversary of Hurricane Helene.
Oh, wow. All right. Marissa, thank you so much.
Let's get a closer look at what to expect from today's forecast with your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is with us now. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And we'll continue that wildfire story along the East Coast because while we don't have current red flag warnings, the fire danger does continue today. As Marissa said, we're going to see the winds blowing, not quite as much as yesterday, so that's why we don't have the red flag warnings. But we are so bone dry in these areas. We will probably be able to use this graphic for many months to come because we are so dry, so below average in terms of rainfall. And today, the relative humidity is very, very low, falling below 25%. So while there is some improvement in the winds, we're going to see them picking up a bit. So as we look up and down the East Coast, we are looking at high fire danger from portions of Pennsylvania all the way from Washington, D.C. to New York, Georgia, and the Carolinas. So a story that we're going to continue to watch very, very closely. That's one big weather story. Another one is a flood threat, continuing flood threat throughout southern Texas. Also rain falling still in the Pacific Northwest. We have mountain snow that will be over 8 inches when it's all said and done in some spots. And also heavy rain along the coast. Could see a few more thunderstorms as well. But we are watching the flood alerts across southern Texas because heavy rain is falling. We're looking at downpours. It's going to continue downpour today into tomorrow morning. Notice all those bright colors. That's telling us where that really heavy rain is falling. Also seeing some lightning. It's sort of subtropical moisture coming off the Gulf. So we're going to see that training in place today or spinning over the same area. So we could see 4 to 8 inches of rain, but some spots could see up to 10, even 15 locally. And a few thunderstorms are possible, guys. We could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Could see some hail and possibly a tornado, but that's on the lower side. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you very much. There's much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including some new evidence in the trial of accused University of Idaho killer Brian Kohberger. The mask he allegedly purchased that prosecutors say matches one seen on a man by a witness.
First, after the break, Vice President J.D. Vance preparing for a visit to Greenland tomorrow, but the North Atlantic nation isn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for him. We're going to take you there next.
Welcome back. Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance are preparing for a trip to Greenland tomorrow. But not everybody's ready to welcome them. Greenland's leader has called the anticipated visit from U.S. officials highly aggressive after President Trump vowed to annex the Danish territory at the start of the year. Here's NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter with more on this.
Hey guys, good morning from the most northern capital in the world. We're 150 miles south of the Arctic Circle. And when the vice president and a high-level U.S. delegation flies in tomorrow, there will be no grand welcome, no American flags flying in the streets, and no photo ops with locals.
This morning in the capital of Greenland, the Arctic cold shoulder, a new trip at the center of the diplomatic fallout over President Trump's push to take over the territory. When Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance arrive tomorrow with a U.S. delegation, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, they will not set foot here in Nuuk or any other Greenlandic cities. Instead, flying straight to the remote Northwest to Bidufik Space Base to visit with U.S. military personnel. For the last 75 years, it's been America's Arctic listening post, the first line of defense against Russian or Chinese ballistic missiles.
I'm going to visit some of our guardians in the Space Force on the northwest coast of Greenland and also just check out what's going on with the security there of Greenland.
The trip, originally billed as a cultural visit for the Second Lady,
hope that our relationship will only grow stronger in the coming years.
But now, the historic tour stops have been dropped, the vice president is joining, and the focus is national security. Yesterday, President Trump doubled down.
We need Greenland, and the world needs us to have Greenland, including Denmark. Denmark has to have us have Greenland.
But the Danish government, which controls the territory, doesn't see it that way. Earlier this week, before the itinerary changed, the Danish prime minister accused the Trump administration of putting unacceptable pressure on Greenland. Greenland is home to an estimated 1.5 million tons of rare earth elements, as well as untapped oil and natural gas reserves. And Trump wants access. But the leaders here have been clear. Greenland is not up for grabs, and the American delegation is not invited.
Now, we got in late last night. We've been speaking to as many people as we can, and Greenlanders say the world finally knows who they are and where they are. Now, Greenlanders say, at least the ones we've been speaking to, they like America. They're eager to attract more American investment, but most of them don't want to be American.
All right, Molly, thank you.
We are following breaking news this morning off the coast of Egypt. Several people are dead after a tourist submarine sank in the Red Sea.
NBC's Matt Bodner is following that and some other news for us. Matt, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. The name of the vessel is Sindbad, and it is an actual tourist submarine as opposed to a semi-submerged boat. Real submarines for tourists are rare, and Sindbad has been operating for years out of the resort town of Hurghada. The sub can go 80 feet below the surface, and it can carry 44 people. Every passenger aboard was Russian, and the Russian embassy in Egypt says 4 of them have died. They're waiting for information on several others. Russian news agencies suggest that several may still be trapped in the sunken sub. Meanwhile, local authorities say 6 people have died in total. Moving along now to Sudan, the Sudanese army says it has recaptured Khartoum's airport. This is a major step towards reestablishment of government control over the city. The military has been fighting against a rival paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces since April 2023. The Sudanese army chief declared Khartoum is now free, but the RSF still controls parts of the western Darfur region as well as other areas. At least 28,000 people have died in the past 2 years of fighting. And we'll wrap up this hour with the Oxford English Dictionary, which has added a new word from the Philippines Tagalog language. The word is giggle. It refers to a, quote, feeling so intense it gives the irresistible urge to tightly clench our hands, grit our teeth, and pinch or squeeze whomever or whatever it is we find so adorable. Giggle is one of a number of foreign words with no direct English equivalent added to the dictionary this year. You'll feel giggle right now, for example, when you look at this photo of my cat, Nika. And on that note, if anyone knows a word to describe liking the pet more than the owner, please let me know. Back to you guys.
Wait, do you have a painting of your cat, Matt?
My grandmother did it.
Yes, okay.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Hangs proudly in the entranceway.
I will be honest, my mother gave me a painting of one of my cats once, so it's a thing that
it's
parents like to do, I guess. I don't know.
Matt says he went so far as to say it's normal. All right, Matt
Everyone
and Joe.
2 of the 3
Thank
people
you.
here at it done. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, outrage on the campus of Tufts University just outside of Boston this morning.
What we know about the graduate student detained by plainclothes ICE officials amid a controversial immigration crackdown. Stay with us. That's next.
We're back with new developments in the case of the 4 murdered University of Idaho students. Prosecutors are revealing more evidence they say connects accused killer Bryan Kohberger to the crime. That includes details about a mask he allegedly purchased months before the killings. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has the latest.
Hey there. From the very beginning of this case, we've known that prosecutors want to introduce surveillance footage, cell records, and of course, DNA evidence against Bryan Kohberger. But what he is accused of writing and buying before the killings, the state now says should come in at trial.
Prosecutors offering new revelations this morning about some of the evidence they plan to use against Bryan Kohberger, the man they believe killed 4 University of Idaho students in 2022.
State v. Kohberger.
This is the type of black mask or balaclava prosecutors say Kohberger purchased 10 months before the murders of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. The same type of mask, they say, a surviving roommate told police she saw on an unknown man in the home the night of the murders, even drawing her own sketch for authorities.
She described seeing someone wearing all black, a mask, with only a portion of their face showing.
A judge entered a not guilty plea for Kohberger, who has maintained his innocence heading into trial this summer, while his legal team appears poised to keep him off the witness stand, arguing Kohberger's autism, including his, quote, intense gaze, awkward body posture, and inability to show emotion, could sway a jury to wrongfully convict. His attorney is also offering new details in court papers, saying after a SWAT team arrested Kohberger at his parents' Pennsylvania home, he did not perceive the profoundly serious nature of the moment, apparently making small talk with the detective during the car ride to the police station, and even suggesting they, quote, get a coffee at a later date. Kohberger's defense adding as a child he was treated for special needs and that his ability to testify in trial and the decision to testify will be nearly impossible. The state firing back with new evidence, with prosecutors trying to show, quote, his knowledge of crime scenes, including Kohberger's college records, where he studied criminal justice. In a final class paper, Kohberger allegedly detailing the steps he would take as an investigator, approaching a crime scene with a deceased white female. The suspected weapon in his hypothetical case, a knife. The father of victim Kaylee Gonsalves speaking out.
He is a smart guy. Figured he'd have some better way to explain what he was doing that night, but he didn't.
How exactly Bryan Kohberger's defense team plans to introduce his autism at trial, still unclear at this point. Also unclear whether the judge will even let him. He's set to decide that in the coming weeks. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you. Protests are continuing after a Tufts University graduate student was detained by federal immigration officials and accused of supporting Hamas. Home surveillance video shows the moment the Turkish national was stopped by officials who were wearing plain clothes and masks. It is the latest in a string of student and faculty detentions nationwide. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now from Medford, Massachusetts with the latest. Steph, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Rumeysa Ozturk is pursuing a doctorate here at Tufts University in child studies. Her attorney says she is here on a valid student visa. On Tuesday night, she was going home in the early evening when she was confronted and then detained by ununiformed and masked federal authorities. The incident sparking some alarm in her neighborhood and triggering protests here on campus.
Hundreds of angry protesters gathering near Tufts University's campus, calling on the federal government to release doctoral student Rumeysa Ozturk. The demonstration, roughly 24 hours after Ozturk's attorney says the Turkish national with a valid student visa was detained by federal authorities as she was walking home. Video obtained by NBC News shows a man not wearing a uniform confronting Ozturk on the sidewalk and apparently grabbing her phone, the 30-year-old clearly alarmed. He is joined by 5 other people, all wearing masks, repeatedly telling Ozturk they are law enforcement, before cuffing her and taking her away. In a statement, the Department of Homeland Security tells NBC News an investigation found Ozturk engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization, that are grounds for visa issuance to be terminated. DHS did not specify what Ozturk is accused of doing. According to her attorney, she was flown to a detention facility in Louisiana early Wednesday morning, despite a judge's order the day before that Ozturk not be taken from Massachusetts without first providing 48 hours of advance notice, while the court decides whether she is being legally detained. Ozturk's friend and a former Muslim chaplain at Tufts called the detainment shocking.
I certainly wouldn't be encouraging anyone at this moment to
come to the U.S. and expect to feel safe.
A year ago, Ozturk co-wrote an opinion article in her school's newspaper that called on the university to acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and divest from companies tied to Israel, but did not name Hamas. In January, President Trump signed an executive order stating non-citizens of the U.S. can be deported for being involved in pro-Palestinian protests. The DHS called the Tufts arrest, quote, common sense security, while its secretary on a trip highlighting another immigration focus of the president. Kristi Noem visiting a prison in El Salvador where deported migrants are being held. The secretary posting a video with prisoners in the background.
If you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face.
Back here in Massachusetts, Ozturk's attorney says that she's not aware of any charges against her client. Meanwhile, the judge's order has given the federal government until Friday to provide an explanation of why Ozturk was detained. Here at Tufts University, the school has reached out to students acknowledging that they might be alarmed, especially international students, over this incident. The president of the university says he was not informed and did not cooperate with federal officials. Joe?
All right, Stephanie, thank you. Coming up, beacons of hope. After the break, we're going to take you to the City of Angels, where one organization is offering women in LA who might be experiencing homelessness so much more than a place to stay. We're going to explain next. Last night in Boston, the World Figure Skating Championships honored the 67 lives lost in January's mid-air collision over Washington, D.C., with a powerful tribute. Among those killed, 28 members of the figure skating community, including former Olympians Xenia and Vadim Naumov. Well, recently, Today Show co-anchor Craig Melvin sat down with their son Max, who's also a skater. They discussed how he got through his first competitive performance after the tragedy.
Tragedy after triumph. Just days after placing fourth at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, Max Naumov learned he'd lost the people he loved most.
How did you find out what had happened?
My mom let me know that they're switching flights and that if I could, pick them up. My mom always texts me and calls me as soon as they land.
But the call never came. January 29th, an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with American Airlines Flight 5342 over Washington, D.C. Max's parents, Xenia and Vadim, were on board that flight. They were Russian Olympians and world champions. After retiring from competition, they settled in the U.S., becoming coaches and raising their only son, Max.
What were Xenia and Vadim like as just parents off the ice?
They were beautiful people. They were so incredibly kind.
That love on full display in his parents' last post on social media, calling his nationals performance beautiful and declaring they were proud of him.
What does that message mean to you now?
Well, it was actually the last thing that they said. It's actually my mom that called me, and she said, hey, I just want you to know that we love you and we're proud of you. It means everything to me. I mean, my whole life, a part of it was to make them proud.
Losing a parent is hard. Losing both parents at the same time in such an unimaginable way. For you, have you given thought to how you move on from this?
The only way out is through. There's no other way. I don't have the strength or the passion or the drive or the dedication of one person anymore. It's three people.
Part of that dedication has meant getting back on the ice.
Has skating changed for you at all since the accident?
Most definitely.
How so?
When you're in such a regimen, such a intense training schedule, essentially I have a list, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. These are the things I have to get done. It doesn't feel like that anymore. There's no list. It's just free. Like I could just be free on the ice.
Max says he brought that freedom of expression to his first performance since the accident. A moving tribute to all the lives lost at Legacy on Ice in Washington, D.C. earlier this month. Max performed for the first and last time to his parents' favorite Russian love song.
At the end, you fall to your knees and you've got
15,000 people applauding, and you're on the ice for more than a minute. What was going through your mind at that point? What are you thinking?
I skated truly, like, from my heart, like, genuinely. I wasn't thinking about the steps. I wasn't thinking about the jumps or the spins or anything like that. I just let my body go, and I've never felt that before. I just had such an overwhelming emotion of love in that moment.
It looked like you were mouthing something at one point while you were on the ice. What were you saying?
I just kept saying "Esto de la vas," which means this is for you, and Mom and Dad, I love you.
Max is an alternate for the U.S. national team right now. This son of Olympians is considering his next moves regarding training ahead of the Winter Games in Milan next year.
I haven't made a final decision on what I'm going to do, but I'm listening to my body, to what I feel when I'm on the ice, and it feels really good.
No matter what he decides to do, on or off the ice, he knows his parents are with him.
I would not be the person I am today without them. Their love and their care was evident in each stage of my life. They were always like superheroes to me.
Our thanks to Craig for that report. And Craig says while Max is weighing that Olympics decision, he has already stepped up to lead the youth academy that his parents founded at the Skating Club of Boston. The World Figure Skating Championships do continue this afternoon. You can watch live on USA Network and Peacock at 3 p.m. Eastern. All right, let's get you the latest read on unemployment. CNBC's Silvana Henao has those numbers and some other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. All right, well, we are just getting the latest snapshot on the labor market. U.S. applications for unemployment benefits, they held steady last week, a sign that the labor market remains healthy as companies continue to retain their employees. So jobless claims filings ticked down by 1,000 to 224,000 for last week. That was according to the Labor Department. That's mostly in line with the 225,000 new applications that analysts were forecasting. All right, Chinese President Xi Jinping will reportedly meet tomorrow with the CEOs of automakers BMW and Mercedes, as well as chip giant Qualcomm. Reuters says the meeting comes as the government looks to boost ties with foreign companies as investment in China has dropped, and in the face of U.S. tariffs targeting the world's second largest economy. Now, global companies have been shifting manufacturing away from China to diversify their supply chains as geopolitical tensions rise. And The Office is coming to Chili's. Yeah, the restaurant chain is opening a location in Scranton, Pennsylvania next week that will sort of honor the NBC sitcom, which premiered this week back in 2005. Now, Chili's is the site of the famous episode where Dunder Mifflin employees celebrated the Dundies Awards. Now, Chili's is also enlisting some of the cast members, including Kate Flannery, who played Meredith, and Ryan Baumgartner, who played Kevin, for ads celebrating the show, Joe.
Of course, and it also makes sense because of Kevin's famous chili.
His chili.
There we
exactly.
go. Love it.
Exactly.
All right, thanks, Amount. I appreciate it.
You got it.
All right, now let's take an inside look at the organization that has been a beacon of hope to the homeless community in Los Angeles for nearly 50 years. The number of homeless women in the city has grown by 38% in recent years, and that is making shelters like the Downtown Women's Center more important than ever. NBC News correspondent Liz Croyd spoke with some of the women who call that center home and are now doing their part to help pull others out of homelessness.
Well, hey there, good morning. Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles is home to one of the largest homeless populations in the U.S. It's also home to the Downtown Women's Center, which is so much more than just a place for women to stay. It is offering hope, healing, and real solutions. And the women behind the center say what they're doing can be used as a model to help others experiencing homelessness nationwide.
In the middle of Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, there's a refuge run by women for women that is changing lives.
What comes to mind when someone says Downtown Women's Center?
Home. It's my safe place. I know where it is, and I know the stigma of Skid Row that it's a scary place, but I don't see that when I come down here because these people were the only people that were nice to me and showed me how to get around.
Alex Panetta came to Los Angeles with a dream, moving from Texas to make it as a bartender.
The pandemic hit. I wasn't able to generate more money, so that's how I ended up downtown.
It wasn't long before Alex ended up on the streets, specifically Skid Row, somewhere she never imagined she'd find herself.
It's tough. I'm a veteran, so my military experience really helped me get through it. You know, it can be crazy out there, but I was able to survive it because of the group that rallied around me. The women down here, they're tough, and they taught me to be tough and to be able to survive it.
So many women seeking safety, and in the midst of one of the darkest times of their lives, finding it here at the Downtown Women's Center, which since 1978 has been helping women experiencing homelessness get back on their feet.
Why is feeling safe so important?
You're so vulnerable. You have to be on your guard
all the time.
All the time.
A career as a top-flight model landed Teresa Purcell in the fast lane, quickly taking her down a road of drug use and addiction.
I slept on the streets. I also wound up stealing, and that took me to the penitentiary, along with my drug addiction.
What do you think your life would be like if you hadn't found the center?
I would probably be dead. I wouldn't have made it.
Oh, no. At the age of 74, Teresa considers the center where she now lives her forever home. Now she and Alex are giving back in their own ways.
It doesn't take but a minute to stop and say, I know somewhere where you can go have a bath. There's somewhere that you can go and eat.
It seems like this is a place where women are really helping women and you lift each other up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
As for Alex, she's now using her bartending skills to create scents for the candles sold in the center's coffee shop and leading others in the job training program, all part of the social enterprise initiatives helping women help themselves.
They gave me computer training, financial management training, all that to make sure that I don't end up back on the street, to train me out of homelessness, and that's what we do here.
The need for a place like this is growing as the face of homelessness changes, with women accounting for about a third of those unhoused across LA County.
Everyone experiencing homelessness has a story, and they have family, and they have dreams. No one is choosing homelessness.
The difference here, providing housing, employment, and job training, all in one place and with compassion.
People need to know that you care for them, that you believe in them, that you believe that they can thrive.
It wasn't the route I wanted to go, but it was the route I needed to go.
It gave you purpose, this experience.
Purpose, yes. Nobody wants to live on the street. You're only one check away from being out there yourself. So don't knock the homeless. They're survivors, and they just need that one person that can reach them and get through to them.
And if you're wondering if this model works, the proof is in the numbers. They have a 99% retention rate, which means people almost never return to homelessness once they're housed at the Downtown Women's Center. And remember those candles our friend Alex was mixing up? Well, they were nice enough to send me some here in LA. They are made from start to finish by women who are working to keep themselves out of homelessness, with all of the proceeds of these beautiful candles going right back into the program. Back to you.
That is so cool, Liz. Thank you so much. All right, when we come back, we are stepping up to the plate with a moment millions of baseball fans across the globe have been waiting for. Opening day is finally here, so lace up those cleats, maybe grab some spicy mustard for that ballpark dog. So we're digging into the Major League rematches, the Cinderella stories that are catching our eyes this season. Batter up. That's next. Finally this hour, it's pretty much a holiday today for baseball fans across the country as the 2025 Major League season gets underway. The Dodgers already started the season last week in Japan as they look to repeat as champs. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has a preview of the season from the place where LA came out on top last year, Yankee Stadium in the Bronx.
Well, they are arguably the two greatest words in professional sports. Opening day. Last year, the definition of a blockbuster matchup with the Yankees taking on the Dodgers in the World Series. Both teams have added to their already star-studded lineups. But the biggest news of the offseason, by far, slugger Juan Soto going from the Bronx to Queens, switching jerseys and boroughs, as you now have a fresh wave of elite young talent and surging interest abroad that is setting the stage for another incredible season. With the fields freshly watered, the logos looking sharp, and the players and fans pumped, it's time to play some ball.
It might be the greatest feeling in the world.
The smells, the sounds, the music.
On opening day, any conversation about contenders has to start with one name, Shohei Ohtani, who homered for the Dodgers and thrilled throngs of fans.
My life is baseball.
When MLB opened its season in Tokyo, showcasing its new wave of Japanese stars, many of whom now reside in LA, headlined by Ohtani.
It feels so good to know there's other people of my same race playing the sport that I love and play too.
Their World Series foes, the Yankees, ready for another run with Captain Aaron Judge at the helm.
We came close last year, got a chance to go to the dance, didn't finish the job.
The Bronx Bombers, boosted by some major acquisitions like Max Fried and Cody Bellinger, but also a 29-year-old career minor leaguer.
Second for this one.
J.C. Escada, who at one point was driving for Uber, sharing his big league dream and tears of joy with his mom.
We did it. I made the team.
One missing piece from last year's Yankees squad, superstar Juan Soto, now sporting a jersey for the crosstown rival Mets after signing a record $765 million deal. Soto recently sitting down with our Peter Alexander.
What has this taught you about what baseball means to New Yorkers?
It means a lot to them. They're really passionate, they're really into the game, and they want to win.
It's all part of an atypical season that will see two big league teams, the Rays and the A's, playing in minor league parks.
Major League Baseball is coming to Bristol Motor Speedway.
And a game set for a showdown on a racetrack. So rev your engines and grab your gloves, because it's time to say batter up and play ball. And as far as rule changes this year, not the dramatic shifts that we saw from a couple years ago with the introduction of a pitch clock and larger bases. This year, just some minor tweaks. Major League Baseball did experiment with automatic balls and strikes in spring training, but that's still developmental, as right now everybody excited for what the new year has to bring in America's pastime. Here from Yankee Stadium, Sam Brock, NBC News. Back to you.
Cannot wait. All right, Sam, thank you so much. That is going to do it for this hour of morning news now. But don't go anywhere. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.